You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
Daniel, a logical IT professional, has always believed that everything has a rational explanation, until he moves into a seemingly ordinary apartment. Night after night, he begins experiencing strange disturbances, whispers in the dark, footsteps approaching his bedroom, and shadowy figures lurking just beyond sight. Dismissing these incidents as stress or exhaustion at first, Daniel is soon confronted with disturbing physical evidence that something sinister has invaded his life. Determined to uncover the truth, he sets up a camera to record himself sleeping, only to capture footage so horrifying it shatters everything he thought he knew about reality. What Daniel discovers will make you question every creak you hear in the night. If you enjoy stories that blur the line between fact and fear, make sure to hit subscribe and stay tuned, because here at Soul Studios, the stories might be terrifying, but the scariest part is they're true. It was 3:14 a.m. when a creak in the darkness jolted me awake. My bedroom was bathed in a feeble bluish glow from the streetlight filtering through the curtains. For a moment I thought the sound was part of a dream, a leftover echo from some nightmare I couldn't recall. But then I heard it again. The slow, deliberate groan of a floorboard right outside my bedroom door. My heart stuttered, and I found myself holding my breath. In the stillness of the early morning, every second stretched taut. Silence. I strained to listen, ears pricking for any hint of another noise. A faint tap, tap, tap broke the hush, like bare footsteps on the hardwood floor of the hallway. Each step was measured, cautious, as if someone or something was approaching, trying not to wake me. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, like a drumbeat of dread. The door to my bedroom was slightly ajar. I always left it open just a crack. Through that narrow opening, the darkness of the hall looked absolute. As I watched, the strip of black seemed to shift. A shadow passed across the gap, blocking out the faint light from the living room nightlight for just a second. My stomach clenched. Someone is in my apartment. That was my first thought. Adrenaline surged through me, jolting me fully awake. I wanted to call out, to demand who was there, but fear swallowed my voice. Instead, I sat up as quietly as I could, the bed springs creaking under my weight. The soft noise might as well have been a gunshot in the quiet. It echoed off the walls. I winced, heart hammering even harder. Whoever was out there had to have heard it. For a long moment, nothing happened. I almost convinced myself I was alone after all, that I'd imagined the footsteps and that fleeting shadow. Then, with agonizing slowness, the door began to drift open. Inch by inch, the hinge whispered a protest. My mouth went dry. A shape, tall, hunched, and impossibly dark, stood just beyond the threshold. I couldn't make out any features, just a black silhouette against the softer gloom behind it. It was as if the darkness itself had grown denser, taken form. A cold wave of fear rolled through me, pinning me in place. I felt utterly exposed in my bed, like a trapped animal. I thought I could hear something, a faint rasping sound, almost a whisper. The figure in the doorway crouched low, its contours barely distinguishable from the shadows. I blinked, struggling to see if my eyes were playing tricks. I prayed I was still dreaming. Suddenly, a door deeper inside the apartment closed violently, shattering the silence. There were no windows open, no draft. Nothing visible that should have caused that. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. In the split second, I glanced toward the source of the crash, and when I snapped my eyes back to my bedroom door, the doorway was empty. The shadowy intruder was gone. The only movement was my curtain stirring gently in the slight draft. I was left sitting there in the pale gloom, shaking and drenched in sweat, with a lingering sense that I was not alone. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. It began about 2 weeks before that sleepless night. My name is Daniel, and I'm a 35-year-old IT professional, a logical, no-nonsense kind of guy. I live alone in a one-bedroom apartment on a quiet street in an American city, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever really happens. If you had asked me then, I would have said ghosts aren't real, and paranormal stories are just products of overactive imaginations. In fact, I was the guy who'd roll his eyes at friends swapping ghost stories. I trusted hard evidence, science, reason. That's why, when the strange occurrences started, I brushed them off. At first, it was little things. Odd sounds in the middle of the night, fleeting sensations that something was just off. I had been pulling long hours at work on a big project, sometimes late into the night, surviving on caffeine and too little sleep. I figured I was simply stressed and sleep-deprived. In my rational mind, there was always an explanation. The first time it happened, I remember it vividly. I was lying in bed around midnight, scrolling through my phone when I heard what sounded like a footstep in the hall outside my bedroom, just a single creak of the floor. I live on the ground floor of my building, and the floors are old hardwood. They settle and make noises. Probably just the building shifting, I told myself, or maybe the upstairs neighbor. I even got up to double-check my front door lock. It was secure. There was nothing out of place, no one there. I shrugged it off and went back to bed. A couple of nights later, I was drifting to sleep when I was startled awake by a faint whispering. My eyes snapped open and I lay there, straining to make out words. It sounded like multiple voices whispering all at once, but too muffled to understand. It only lasted a few seconds. My heart pounded as I sat up in the darkness, listening. The whispering stopped as abruptly as it began. In the silence that followed, I could hear the hum of my refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant whoosh of a car on the street outside. Nothing else. After a minute, I shook my head. Thin walls, I reasoned. Perhaps my next-door neighbor had fallen asleep with their TV on low, or voices from the street were carrying through the open window. It was summer, and I often kept a window cracked for air. There was always an explanation, I told myself again. Then there were the shadows. On more than one occasion, I thought I saw a dark shape dart past my bedroom door in my peripheral vision. It was the kind of quick movement that would make me turn my head and blink, only to find nothing there. Once, I had just finished brushing my teeth at night, and as I stepped out of the bathroom, I glimpsed what looked like a person-sized silhouette at the far end of the hallway. I almost yelped in surprise, but when I flicked on the hall light, the corridor was empty. The shadow was gone, if it had ever been there at all. I laughed at myself that time, albeit nervously. I figured it was a trick of the light, perhaps a car's headlights through the window, casting weird moving shadows as it drove by. My rational brain eagerly supplied any benign explanation to avoid jumping to fantastical conclusions. Each incident by itself was easy enough to dismiss. I never mentioned any of it to anyone. It was too trivial, I thought, and I didn't want to sound like a paranoid fool. After all, I prided myself on being the logical guy. Ghosts, demons, things that go bump in the night, that was the stuff of movies and internet lore, not real life, and certainly not my life. So I carried on, attributing the eerie occurrences to stress, exhaustion, or mundane house noises, at least for a while. Over the next several days, the disturbances went from curious to unsettling. One morning I woke up feeling an odd soreness, and when I rolled up my pajama sleeve, I found a large bruise blooming purple on my upper arm. It was tender to the touch, as if I'd been grabbed forcefully. I stared at it in confusion. I couldn't recall bumping into anything or injuring myself. The bruise vaguely resembled a handprint, as if someone's fingers had wrapped around my bicep. A chill prickled the back of my neck at that thought. I reasoned I must have slept on it wrong, or perhaps pinched my arm against the headboard. It wouldn't be the first time I'd gotten a random bruise without remembering how. So I let it go, trying not to overthink. But a few nights later, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I jolted awake at 2 a.m. with a stinging pain on my back, right between my shoulder blades. Wincing, I stumbled to the bathroom and twisted in front of the mirror. 3 distinct scratch marks slashed across my skin, just within reach over my shoulder. The angry red lines looked fresh, beads of blood just beginning to surface. They were parallel, about the length of finger strokes or claw marks. My hands trembled as I touched them. I keep my fingernails trimmed short. There was no way I could have clawed myself that deeply in my sleep. And there were 3 marks, an eerie detail that sent my mind racing. I remembered reading somewhere, back when I used to laugh at such things, that 3 scratches are supposed to be a mocking sign of an evil presence. At that thought, a wave of nausea rolled through me. I quickly dismissed it, but the unease was growing. I spent the rest of that night wide awake on the couch, every light in my apartment turned on. The next day at work, I was exhausted, jumpy at every little sound. I finally confided in my friend Jake during our lunch break. I told him, as calmly as I could manage, that I thought something strange was happening in my apartment. I even showed him a photo of the scratches I had snapped on my phone. Jake raised an eyebrow and gave me a half smile. "Well, that's one way to get out of work early," he joked, clearly thinking I was messing with him. But when he saw I wasn't laughing, his face grew serious. He asked if I might be sleepwalking or unknowingly hurting myself due to stress. I admitted I'd never sleepwalked before, but I couldn't entirely rule it out. He suggested I set up some kind of camera, or at least a motion-activated app on my phone to record myself at night. If I was doing this to myself somehow, I needed to know. At first, I resisted the idea. It felt a bit extreme, like inviting my irrational fears to take center stage. But that evening, as I changed out of my work shirt, I caught a glimpse of the scratches on my back in the mirror. The 3 raw lines were undeniable evidence that something was wrong. I couldn't just laugh this off or attribute it to an overactive mind. For the first time, I felt a gnawing certainty that whatever the cause, something unseen had touched me. The thought made my skin crawl. That night, I decided to follow Jake's advice. I was done trying to ignore or explain away the phenomenon. If there was some rational explanation, if I was sleepwalking, or if some intruder was sneaking in, I needed to know. And if it was something else, something I couldn't explain, well, I needed to know that too. I set up an old webcam I had lying around from a previous project, positioning it on my bedroom dresser facing my bed. I made sure it had a clear view of me sleeping. I even tested it, walking around the room to ensure it would capture any movement. I also downloaded a night recording app on my phone as backup and placed the phone on my nightstand, camera pointed at the bed. It felt odd, and admittedly a bit creepy, deliberately filming myself sleep. But I was determined. I told myself it would likely show nothing more than me tossing and turning. In the back of my mind, I think I was hoping it would prove that nothing at all was happening, that it was all truly in my head. When I finally turned off the lights, my heart was pounding with anticipation and fear. The room fell into deep shadow, illuminated only by the faint red glow of the webcam's recording light. I lay there on my back, staring up at the dark ceiling. Silence enveloped me, broken only by the gentle whir of the fan in the corner. I clutched my phone in one hand for comfort, its screen long since gone dark, leaving me alone with my uneasy thoughts. My pulse thudded in my throat as I waited for sleep, and possibly whatever else might come. Eventually, after what felt like hours of anxiety, I drifted into a fitful slumber, not knowing that my night vigil had only just begun. I woke up the next morning with a sense of dread knotted in my stomach. In the pale daylight filtering through my curtains, the whole idea of last night's vigil felt surreal. But the ache in my muscles from sleeping so tensely was very real. I had a hazy memory of waking up in the dark, of feeling frozen in fear, of the door moving, of something in my room. Parts of it felt like a nightmare, yet I knew I had been awake. My hands trembled as I sat at my computer to review the footage. With trembling hands, I hit play. The video file timestamp read 11 p.m., the time I'd started recording. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Just me, lying in bed, shifting occasionally under the covers, the room dimly lit by the streetlight glow. I fast-forwarded through hours of footage, my anxiety mounting as the timeline crept toward the middle of the night. Around 3 a.m., I slowed the playback. I watched myself on the screen, sleeping on my side, a dark lump under the blankets. The bedroom door was in frame off to the left. At 3:14 a.m., the footage caught something that made my blood run cold. On the screen, the bedroom door began to open, on its own. I felt my mouth go dry as I watched the door swing wider, inch by inch, until there was a gap about a foot wide. The hallway beyond was pitch black, but within that darkness, a figure slowly came into view. Even on the grainy video, I could tell it was the same dark silhouette I'd glimpsed before. Tall, vaguely human in shape, but utterly black, as if it absorbed all light. The figure stood in the doorway for a long moment, seemingly watching me sleep. Then it slipped inside my room with an unnaturally smooth, gliding motion. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples as I stared at the screen, hardly believing what I was seeing. The figure moved closer to my bed. Its form so dark, it was hard to make out any details. There were moments where the image flickered with static, as if the camera struggled to focus on it. At one point, it crouched down at the foot of my bed, just as I'd feared. The sight was like a scene from my worst nightmares. This thing, crouching mere inches from my sleeping body, silently observing. My stomach churned and I had to fight the urge to look away, but I kept watching, morbidly transfixed. On the video, I saw myself suddenly stir. My sleeping form shifted, then my head lifted. I saw my own face on the grainy video turn toward the dark figure. Even in black and white night vision, I could make out the moment terror overtook my features, as I, the me on screen, seemingly locked eyes with the thing at my bedside. Instead of attacking or fleeing, the shadowy figure twisted its head sharply, almost inhumanly, toward the camera, as if it knew it was being watched. For a split second, I had the horrible feeling that it was aware of me, the present-day me, watching it through the screen. Then, in an eye blink, the figure vanished from view. A half-second later, the camera audio recorded a deafening slam, presumably the bedroom door slamming shut, the same slam I'd heard in person. The image on the recording crackled with static for a couple of seconds. When the picture cleared, the timestamp was 3:16 a.m., and I was alone in the room, sitting upright in bed, eyes wide and searching. I watched myself on the video scramble back against the headboard, clearly panicking at something in the darkness. I remembered that feeling vividly, the sheer animal terror of knowing something was there. It didn't dart away or exit through the door. It just wasn't there anymore, as if it had dematerialized. I paused the video. My hands were shaking so badly that the mouse nearly slipped from my grip. I felt a mix of vindication and utter horror. I finally had proof that something was in my home, something that defied all logic and reason. But seeing it there, so bold, so close to me, it was worse than any nightmare. I had to take a few minutes to collect myself before replaying the critical moments again, frame by frame. Each time, I hoped I might spot some clue, anything that would make it less real, like a trick of the light or a person in a costume. But no matter how many times I watched it, the dark figure was unmistakably real. The way it moved was unlike any human, and the way it vanished, one frame it was there, the next, it was simply gone. No human, no solid creature could do that. It wasn't an intruder in the usual sense. This was something else, something not of this world. A wave of cold realization washed over me. Whatever this entity was, it had been creeping into my room at night, watching me, possibly even touching me. My eyes darted to the faint scars where the scratches had been on my back. I felt violated and terrified. My rational mind struggled to catch up. Part of me still insisted there had to be a logical explanation, even as the proof hovered right in front of my eyes on the screen. My first instinct was to get out of the apartment, to be anywhere but there. I grabbed my keys and phone and rushed out into the late morning sun without even brushing my teeth. I sat in my car in the parking lot, hands trembling on the wheel, unsure of where to go or what to do next. Finally, I called Jake. It was hard to keep my voice steady as I told him I got it on video. He didn't understand at first. I must have been talking a mile a minute, half in panic. I begged him to meet me at a coffee shop nearby, saying it was urgent. When I showed Jake the footage on my laptop at the cafe, his face went pale. He watched in stunned silence, eyes glued to the screen. When the video ended, he just said, "Holy Daniel, what is that?" I could only shake my head. For once, I had no rational explanation, and neither did he. Jake urged me not to go back home. "Crash at my place, man," he insisted, still eyeing me like I might shatter into pieces. I agreed without hesitation. I didn't want to be alone in that apartment or anywhere that night. That night at Jake's apartment, I barely slept. I camped on his living room couch with the lights dimmed low. For a few hours, the familiar comfort of having a friend nearby lulled me into thinking I might actually be safe. But as the clock crept past 3 a.m., I found myself staring into the quiet darkness of the ceiling once more, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Perhaps it was just my mind playing tricks after all the trauma of the previous night. I closed my eyes, telling myself I was surrounded by 4 solid walls and a locked door with my friend just down the hall. What could happen here? Then I heard it, a soft whisper from somewhere near the couch. My name, Daniel, drawn out in a breathy, sing-song murmur. My eyes flew open. The living room was mostly dark, the only light a faint amber glow from the kitchen nightlight. In that dimness, I saw a shape just at the edge of my vision, near the corner where the wall met the ceiling. A vaguely human silhouette, impossibly contorted, as if clinging to the upper corner of the room. I shot upright with a gasp, and in a blink, the whisper stopped as abruptly as it began. The corner was empty. I was shaking uncontrollably, biting down on my hand to keep from screaming and waking Jake. I spent the rest of the night with every light in the apartment on, jumping at the slightest shift of shadow. Morning could not come fast enough. By dawn, I knew the truth. Leaving my apartment hadn't saved me. It wasn't the apartment that was haunted. It was me. This realization settled over me like a death sentence. I couldn't impose on Jake forever, and I certainly couldn't risk dragging him, or anyone else, into this nightmare. With a heavy heart, I lied to him that morning, saying I felt better and just needed some rest. I thanked him and told him I'd take a few days off work to recuperate. He reluctantly accepted, telling me to call if I needed anything. In reality, I was terrified, but determined. If I was marked by this thing, I couldn't run from it. Maybe I needed to confront it, on my own terms. I returned to my apartment before noon, every fibre of my being trembling with dread. The place felt different now, the air heavier, the shadows sharper in the corners. I spent the day cleaning up, as if tidying the physical space might somehow dispel the evil lingering there. It was an empty gesture, and I knew it. By nightfall, I was running on fumes, but I refused to fall asleep. I made myself a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, a crucifix I'd borrowed from Jake's place clutched in one hand. Though I'm not religious at this point, I was willing to try anything for a sense of protection. The hours dragged by. Around 2:45 a.m., the lights in my kitchen flickered. Just a brief dimming, then back to normal. My pulse quickened. I rose to my feet, holding the little crucifix out in front of me like a shield, a last resort. My phone was in my other hand, camera recording. Some desperate part of me thought about documenting whatever might happen, in case the worst befell me. A minute passed, then another. Every tick of the clock on the wall was a gunshot in the silence. Then I heard the floorboard creak in the hallway. One single pronounced step. It was just beyond the kitchen doorway, in the dark. I swallowed hard, my mouth bone dry. My knees were moments from buckling, but I forced myself to speak, voice shaking, into the emptiness. What do you want from me?" My words just hung there, no echo, as if the darkness itself swallowed them up. For a moment there was nothing, and then a shape peeled away from the darkness of the hall, the same formless black humanoid outline. It slowly crossed the threshold into the kitchen light. I could see it more clearly now than ever, an opaque shadow in the vague shape of a person, tall and gaunt, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. There were no visible eyes, but I felt it looking at me, into me. The kitchen light above flickered and buzzed, as if its energy were being sapped by the entity's presence. A wave of icy cold swept over me. I wanted to run, to scream, something, but I was frozen. I don't know if it was pure terror or some power of the entity over me, but I couldn't move a muscle. I stood paralyzed, arm outstretched with the crucifix. My phone slipped from my other hand and clattered to the floor. The shadow figure drifted closer. It moved without sound or effort, closing the distance until it loomed an arm's length in front of me. I could barely breathe. In the half-light, its edges seemed to shimmer, indistinct. For the first time, I heard a sound emanate from it, a low, rasping chuckle that reminded me of dry leaves scraping on pavement. I felt tears running down my face, sheer primal terror overwhelming me. Summoning every ounce of will, I croaked out, "Please, just leave me alone." My voice was a pathetic whimper. The thing cocked its head even further, as if considering my plea. Then, sudden as a lightning strike, it lunged. An explosion of pain erupted in my chest and I was slammed backward. I hit the kitchen wall and collapsed to the floor, the impact jolting every bone in my body. Spots danced in my vision as I tried desperately to suck in air. I felt something cold and heavy pressing on my chest, an invisible weight, like a giant hand or a foot, pinning me down. And then, as quickly as it came, the pressure lifted. I scrambled up, gasping, clutching the crucifix to my heart. The shadow figure was gone. Only empty air hung above me. I dragged myself to my feet, still wheezing, and frantically flicked on every light I could reach. The kitchen was empty, but I knew it was still there, somewhere in the apartment, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. It had toyed with me, demonstrated its power and my powerlessness. In that moment I realized I was utterly at its mercy. That was last night. Which brings me to now, to me telling you this story. I haven't truly slept in days, and every time I close my eyes, I feel that thing lurking just out of sight. I can't keep living like this, caught between terror and exhaustion, not knowing what it will do next. Perhaps by the time you hear this, I'll have gathered the courage to seek out a priest or a paranormal expert, or maybe I'll have fled far away, though I doubt distance will matter if it's truly attached to me. All I know for certain is, I am not alone. I haven't been, since this all began. Maybe you think I'm crazy, or that this is all some elaborate hoax or delusion. I wouldn't blame you. A few weeks ago, I wouldn't have believed any of this either. But please, believe me now. It's real. I have the scars, the footage, and the waking nightmares to prove it. I can only share my story and hope that someone out there listening understands that sometimes the scariest things are real. Sometimes the monsters in the dark are real. As I finish this account, the afternoon sunlight is starting to fade. The day's quiet has fallen over my apartment, and for a brief moment I let myself entertain the hopeful thought that maybe it's finally over. Maybe the nocturnal visitor has moved on and I'll be free. But then I hear it, a familiar floorboard creaking just behind me, followed by the softest whisper of my name. Daniel. My blood turns to ice. I don't dare turn around. Daniel never found answers, only fear. His apartment sits vacant now, silent but not empty. Remember, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't watching you. Some visitors never leave.
Every story has an end, but here the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.